Sing unto God, sing a new song sing unto God, one thanks to God with a song. Oh, sing praises unto the one above. Let us rejoice, all ye righteous, and cry out to our God with joy. Sing out from your hearts, oh, sing praises to God. Bless God's name, oh, sing unto our God a song of prayer. Sing praises to the one, sing unto God. Sing unto God, sing a new song sing unto God, sing a new song sing unto God, sing a new song unto God. Sing a new song to God.
You have tuned into SBTV3, that's Seal Beach Community Television. And we have just heard my guest, Galit Levy Slater, playing her guitar. She is a cantor and rabbi to a congregation, Sholom, here in Leisure World. My other guest is Don Rowe, the pastor at Leisure World Community Church. And the subject for today's Inside Leisure World is Make a Joyful Noise. That is part of the content of the 100th Psalm. And we've been doing it for a long time, or trying our best. That was a great, cheerful, joyful noise. Thank you.
Thank you.
And in our church, we have a lot of tradition, and that was a bright, rather new song, I think.
Yes, it was written by Debbie Friedman, who she is probably one of the most prolific modern composers.
She's part of this Reformed
yes.
Jewish congregations
Right.
or synagogues or whatever.
Although her music has snuck its way into the conservative and the Orthodox movements as well.
Well, it sure peps things up. And in the congregational, in our church, in Leisure World there, in the community church, we're melding lots of Reformed or Protestant churches into one congregation. So sometimes we turn up with hymns that aren't familiar to me.
Yeah, the community church in Leisure World, I guess you could say, is a conglomeration of what we might refer to as the mainline denominations. For instance, like Lutheran, Presbyterian, Episcopalian, United Methodist, Congregationalists, and other faith traditions, what you might say is in the Protestant tradition. And every denomination has its, you might say, its unique hymns. But then there are hymns that have a way of transcending the very denominations. And so at community church, you'd say there's a sense of the unfamiliar, yet the familiar at the same time when it comes to music.
And we have, beyond the hymn business, there's soloists, instrumentalists, there's organ, there's piano, sometimes a trumpet solo, often a flute accompanies something. And so there's a lot of music, and maybe we begin to take it for granted a little, but we really should give it all the glory, because it keeps us together, and it also reminds us of things in our past, our parents, our grandparents, the church we were brought up in, and so forth. And so I kind of wanted to put just a little spotlight, I guess, on the music that we should be giving thanks for, and also just being a little more aware of it. We have it printed out on papers in our church, in the community church, and up in the corner it will say who wrote the poem, the words, and it will say when they were born and when they died. And it made me think, well, the context that they lived in was very different. This psalmist, or this hymn writer, died in 1887, or maybe in 1812, or some of them. Those things are very old. And in the Jewish tradition, of course, the Psalms themselves. Did you tell me when you thought those were written?
Those were. All of them are attributed to King David, and that was roughly about 500 BCE, before the current era. But many of them they make reference to times when we were actually in the wilderness for 40 years. So they talk about that particular time. Some of our melodies, the melodies that are used, we refer to as Mi Sinai, which means from Sinai. So the melodies actually come from the time of Moses. It's they were handed down orally from generation to generation.
So they contain some history that we want to remember.
Right.
And some tradition, and some wisdom that is contained. So in the hymn, in our hymnal, there are other scriptures that are are made into songs too. Something's from the New Testament, I suppose.
Yeah, in terms of the hymns that you find in a Protestant hymnal, they might be based on a passage of Scripture, like you referred a moment ago to the 100th Psalm. But then there are other texts that the composer might have come up himself or herself with. Also, there's hymns that have a way of emerging out of a historical context, as you were saying, in relation to King David. And in the Protestant hymnal, I'm most familiar with the United Methodist hymnal, being United Methodist in background. Hymns have a way of emerging out of periods of history in relationship to, you might call it, Negro spirituals. Also, the turn of the 20th century, there was what was called the social gospel movement, where an individual like Washington Gladden or Walter Rauschenbusch wrote hymns in relation to that issue in American religious history. And so hymn texts can emerge out of a number of different sources, including the Scriptures, but not limited to the Scriptures.
But those of us in the congregation maybe don't recognize these authors and know their context, but there's something about the content that makes us say, well, this has a relevance to me. This is a good message. And so it's in my mind now, and I'm humming it, still on Wednesday. And then so the question came to my mind, well, how can these things be relevant if they're so ancient? And how can we know what was on, do we need to know what was on the mind of the person who wrote the hymn? Do we, have to go, shouldn't the minister mention, well, this author of this hymn was part of the these big tent revival meetings, or something like that. But it seems it's not necessary to know.
Well, not necessary, but one could also make the argument very, very necessary. For instance, I can think of one hymn. It's titled "Hymn of Promise," and the composer, she wrote the text as well as the music. Her name was Natalie Sleeth, and it's a remarkable, beautiful hymn affirming the life-death cycle in relationship to the seasons that we find in the year, in terms of spring, fall, winter, summer. And she wrote that hymn after journeying for 25 years with not cervical cancer, but multiple sclerosis, and then later being diagnosed with cervical cancer. And she was a radiant spirit up to the time of her death. And I think understanding where that hymn comes from sheds a light that one would otherwise miss, knowing her story. And yet she affirmed the life-death cycle with the seasonal changes of the year.
It's interesting that you mention that, because the song that I sang before, Debbie Friedman's song, Debbie Friedman had MS and died from complications from it 4 years ago.
Wow.
So and a spirit, she's considered a modern-day Miriam, a modern-day prophet.
So in a beautiful way, we've just cited two individuals who, in the midst of their mortality, their diminishment, ultimately celebrated life. And one of the ways that they celebrated the gift of life that they had received from God was through music. And we might say that music is one form of what we might call the expressive form of religion. That how we draw upon resources like music to express who we are and whose we are.
That's very well put. And it's so it's part of every day, as well as the worship service that a congregation experiences when they come together. These things come out of personal experience when you're not sitting there in your pew, from life experience. Well, anyway, that's so I'm worried sometimes. I can't remember all the words, especially all of the verses of hymns, but I tell you that there's a lot of little phrases that will come to mind. In fact, when I had my car wrecked, I just sung in church the "Be not dismayed, whatever befall you." Right. And I had thought, oh, this is trite. I would never, this would never mean anything in my life. That's an old hymn that my grandparents used to sing, but I don't have that kind of strife. Well, I felt it. So I'm grateful for these hymns, and so I'm not going to shrug it off and say, well, let's have a silent service, or let's not have this big organ stuff or the piano, or we take some comfort other than just soothing from it. We really do. The meaning and that come together. The meaning and the sound, it's rich, very rich experience, and so I'm really. That's one of the reasons, I guess, that I go to church for that wealth of experience.
It's the same way in Judaism. It's in fact, music is the essential part of the service. We have there are two people that lead the service. Essentially, historically, the rabbi just sat back and answered arguments, tried to settle arguments. The cantor is the one who actually led the service, and entirely in music. There was no part of the service that was spoken. Everything is sung. Even when we read from the Torah scroll, we sing it in order to enhance or embellish and to celebrate our belief.
I see. I didn't realize that. But sometimes there's sort of a chanting sound to it, and of course that's something that monks in
the Jewish chant was what the monks heard, and they developed their chant from that.
I see.
Yeah, it was very much in terms of in early Christianity and a monastic movement. There was a lot of appropriation that was going on from the Hebraic tradition. And so our traditions are profoundly interwoven.
True.
And I can identify with what Rabbi Galit just said in terms of the music in synagogue service. In many ways is very similar. In Protestant Christian worship, in terms of the music is really, in many ways, kind of a binding agent in the sense that almost like a glue that holds the service together. Because in the Christian tradition, you might say we experience the Word through music, and also in prayer, and also in terms of preaching or through liturgy. These are varied ways that the Word is expressed.
So there's the prelude, there's the call to worship, there's the offertory, there's the preparation for the sermon, there's a afterword there. Remember, this is what I said.
In Christianity, they have, their holidays are infused with beautiful music. The composers, Handel and those, the Messiah for Easter, and all the Christmas carols for Christmas. In Judaism, I remember my teacher telling me that he knew what holiday it was from the melodies that he would hear, because they would have a particular kind of melody for the High Holy Days, or for Sukkot, or for Simchat Torah, or they were all different. And the weekday is different from the Sabbath.
After about 60 or 70 years,
Right.
I see it's winter. I see it's spring.
Exactly.
I can hear it
Right.
in the community, because these sound. We live more isolated lives now in our houses. We like to have them soundproofed so we don't hear what our neighbors are playing. But there is still a community. Yeah, and the music ties it together. That's great to know.
We might say that worship has what you might call an awakening quality. And then secondly, worship has what we might call a renewing quality. And then thirdly, worship in relationship to its dedicating quality. And music is vitally a part of those three things: awakening, renewal, and dedicating.
You wanted to play another song for us.
This is called Hine Matov, and it is an older traditional melody. I don't remember who wrote it, but I've heard it so many times I can do it actually without the music. And the translation of it is how good and pleasant it is for all of us to dwell together.
I've heard you played this before then, haven't I?
Yes. Hine matov umanayim שבת כולנו יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת כולנו יחד, הנה מה טוב, שבת כולנו יחד, הנה מה טוב, שבת כולנו יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת כולנו יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת כולנו יחד.
I just had a shiver go down my self here to think, why haven't I ever learned this language? It's a very difficult language?
It uses different characters.
Oh, goodness.
Um,
That's a good reason.
It's, yeah. And for instance, in Israel, they don't use they only use the characters, they don't use vowels. All the characters are considered consonants.
Mm.
And the vowels we use them in America because we need to. We don't know the language as well as the Israelis do. So they're made up of little dots and squiggles and stuff. And then there's even more dots and squiggles to indicate musical notation.
Mm.
So it's like learning two different languages at the same time.
That's why I haven't learned it, I suppose. But Jewish children learn some of this before they're 12 years old, is that?
Yes, right.
And that's the bar mitzvah, is to celebrate their having graduated from some school of that language. But, you know, someone earlier was saying to me, well, what was your language before English? You know, are you an immigrant or whatever? What world did you come from? And I never thought about that Hebrew would have been something that's in the back somewhere, you know, and it would have been appropriate to learn it when I was young enough to learn another language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it has a haunting familiarity in a very nice way. And our hymns, well, they all seem modern in comparison. And but this Charles Wesley was the great Methodist hymn writer, and he wrote thousands of hymns, I guess.
Well, it's approximately 6,000 hymns. It's believed that he's written, and some of those hymns, like "Love Divine, All Loves Excelling," is in our hymnal, and some others, but then there's some other hymns that's just as well that didn't make the hymnal, because Charles Wesley would write about all sorts of things, including when he had a bad toothache, and so probably it's best that one was not in the hymnal.
They wrote the hymnal contains the method by which you're supposed to sing these hymns, and it's kind of comical, actually.
Well,
I have it.
I just happen to have here, you know, the founder of the United Methodist Movement, if you were to use the word founder, was John Wesley, and he loved giving instructions for virtually everything, including how you should or should not sing. And I'm not, I can begin, but you let me know when you've had enough, okay? But here's the directions for singing. Learn these tunes, and this has been in every Methodist hymnal since his day. Learn these tunes before you learn any others. Afterwards, learn as many as you please. Sing them exactly as they are printed here, without altering or mending them at all. And if you have learned to sing them otherwise, unlearn it as soon as you can. 3, sing all. See that you join with the congregation as frequently as you can. Let not a slight degree of weakness or weariness hinder you. If it is a cross to you, take it up, and you will find it a blessing. 4. You still want more?
Well, part of it's because some of them were parodies or written on a tune that was a bar tune, I guess.
That is true. Some hymns began in taverns and got appropriated to become religious music or a hymn.
Too.
Okay, so the confessional is now open, but
Yeah,
know,
it's really.
and maybe that's why I love the theme song from Cheers so much. But yeah, but see, and
Life.
seriously, the music is appropriated from life experience.
Life has thresholds, but we cross them, hither and thither.
Right.
So that's great.
Sure.
And it's available if you ever want to look in the hymnal. There it is. I looked on the internet about church music, and I'm from New Hampshire, and of course the Shakers were up there, and their remarks about singing in religious music was that don't bring any instruments in, so lascivious.
Lascivious.
Yeah, this is the organ or the piano or
Right.
or violins or anything like that. No, no, no. Well, raise your voice and dance across the hills and so forth, but be careful about that. Those instruments and so forth.
Well, there can be some. There are some traditions. I'm not an expert on individual traditions, but where music is seen as a blockage. That, and I'm really speaking out of the Christian tradition at this point, in terms of the key issue is the word, in terms of the scriptures and the preaching. And so there are some traditions in Christianity that would say that music kind of gets in the way of things. It's not. I wouldn't say it's the major traditions of the faith, but they are there.
Well, we're coming to the end, close to the end of our half hour together, but I hope that some of the people listening today will give a second thought to that music and that musician and that the way it draws us together and so forth. And Galit, maybe you just play us out with another song.
This is called The Angel Blessing.
Thank you so much for being my guest today.
You're
Both of you.
Thank you.
This is a song that we sing when we're going to go to sleep at night. And it talks about the 4 angels, Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, and Raphael, and about the Shekhinah, which is God's presence. Mi, 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 Michael, umismoli Gabriel, umilfanai Uriel, umeakorai Raphael, ve'al roshi Shekhinah, ve'al roshi Shekhinah, ve'al roshi Shekhinah, ve'al roshi Shekhinah. All around us is Shekhinah. All around us is Shekhinah. All around us is Shekhinah.